But first, let me introduce someone much smarter and much more interesting than me, who's going to do some speaking. So Aisha Barenblatt is the founder of Remake, which is a startup focused on the power of films, visual storytelling, and immersive journeys to create a conscious consumer movement. Now, what all those words mean is that she cares about how we improve the lives of the men and women, the humans who make our clothing. So she's got a really interesting presentation. So Aisha, come on out, and I'm gonna get out of here. I'll see you guys in a little bit.
Good afternoon. I am so excited to be here. I know it's been a long day, but hopefully I can really amp you up. I wanted to start with really just 3 short stories. The first is the story of our clothes. Did you know that in the last 10 years, we have been buying 4 times more clothes and yet somehow paying less for them? Doesn't that just blow your mind? How is that possible, that we get things sooner, cheaper, faster? Well, there's a very real cost to this. Today, the fashion industry is the 2nd largest polluter after oil. Who would think that, right? Most of our clothes end up sitting in landfills for 200 years. But the biggest cost in all of this is really human. This is just a 6-month snapshot in 2012 of the lives lost of the human beings who make our clothes, some of the biggest industrial disasters and fires of our time. How do you feel after I've told you this story? Overwhelmed? Helpless? Wondering how this sort of relates to your daily life? I tell you, this is around the time that my friends tell me, you are really bumming us out, and start to check their Instagram feed. And I get it. I've been telling the story all wrong. So let me tell you a completely different story. It's a story about the young women who make and create the things that we put on our body every day. There are 40 million people that make our clothes. They happen to be women. Most of them are also just 18 to 24 years old. Millennials, just like many of you in this room and on the live stream. So at Remake, what we decided to do was go meet them, sit down with them, have meals, get to know them. From Haiti to Cambodia to Pakistan, we sat down. And the one thread that connects all of these women is this: they are seriously badass. And I've been thinking, in the last day and a half, of the perils of many of the issues and trials and triumphs that we've talking about the millennials right here in our country and their life. You left for college hoping that you'd get a kick-ass job afterwards. Instead, you were dealing with difficult issues of racism, of sexual violence on campus, and perhaps coming out encumbered with debt. She left the village, the safety and security of her home and her family, to do the same. Except she entered the big bad world of factories, often her salary supporting multiple family members. The thing is, her wage started to feel as though it was shrinking because everything around her was costing more, and this dream, much like the American dream, of being able to afford a lift out of poverty was suddenly going away. She also deals with harassment. Most supervisors and bosses in factories are men. Most of the people who do the work, which is common, I think, throughout the world, happen to be women. The other interesting thing about her life is this: she is increasingly digitally connected. She is on WhatsApp. In countries where it isn't banned, she's on Facebook. And she's really curious about you, the end consumer. So what we do is, we're wondering, this crazy experiment that we're trying to run is, if we start to tell you these stories in a more textured way, if we meet you where you are on social networks, through short videos, we've even run bus ads in San Francisco, and tell you the story of her life. If you see her, meet her, get to know her in this textured way, will you care enough about her well-being to want to advocate for her? And so I want to close with a third and final story. It's a story of millennials. Now, it's very irritating. I think every generation tries to do this, where it's this homogenous group that we apply all these different traits to, and I'm not going to do that. There's just 2 things that are very striking. I thought it would be cool to show you this image given the venue that we're at. This is a recent National Geographic's cover. And the story is about the future face of America, racially ambiguous. The truth is, the demographic trends, what they show us is that increasingly we are more and more racially diverse. We don't know what box to check on the census. You don't know where I've really come from. And so who better than the people in this room and on this live stream to say, Anju and Maud and Rubina and all the women who make our clothes, we don't see you as some poor, dark people far away. Your hopes, your dreams are the same as ours. The other thing that all of us as a generation understand is that we've been digitally connected since we were in diapers. And we know how to use digital connection, the tools of our time, to really mainstream the issues that we're grappling with into public consciousness. I'm particularly thinking about love is love, like who can argue with that love wins, or Black Lives Matter. So here's a proposal to you. What if economic activism was the next frontier? What if the things we put on our body reflected our value system? You all care about social justice. Well, guess what? You vote on social justice every single day when you buy something. So practically, so that we don't get overwhelmed, what is it that we should do? The first is to ask more about her. Who made my clothes? Who is she? What is her life like? I want to know her. Whether in-store or online, if you ask that question, I promise you, I've spent a decade working on the inside with brands. They track this information. And today, they don't think you care. But when you ask, they'll have to make working conditions more transparent. The second is to bring back durable fashion. These jeans, I'm going to rock them. These are Levi's jeans. I'm going to wear them not one season, not two seasons, but for many years. They used to be this slow fashion movement of craftsmanship, of a love for what we had, to cherish it, to repair it. And what we can do is say no to fast fashion. The third and final thing that I wanted to present to you is every movement needs a face. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you my dream candidate for who should be the future face of Remake. Now, I am a super Beyonce fan. I've been to her Formation concerts. I've loved her since Destiny's Child. I could sing any song, but you wouldn't want me to do that. But here's the interesting thing about Beyonce. She's the most iconic star of our time. She is someone who's really evolved and found her voice as a feminist and an activist. One of the things that you all may not know is that she's recently dabbled as a designer with her Ivy Park line, which she's made for fast fashion retailer Topshop. And if you've seen any of the ads for Ivy Park, it's about welcoming us into her strength and power, because it's a workout line. It's like, if I'm going to wear Ivy Park, I'm going to be as powerful as you. The thing is, Ivy Park is made in Sri Lanka. And today, the women who make Ivy Park, these are not really desirable jobs. So can you imagine the power if we got information behind the maker and we welcomed her into that strength, and Ivy Park stood for making her life better? So I have a little video for you, but what I want you to do before we play it is to open Twitter, because I want you to do something for me. So. So are you going to do it? Go on then. There's 20,000 people on the live stream. They tell me there's at least 100 people here. Write her. It's an invitation to say, who made it? I want to know her. And maybe then I will buy Ivy Park and share in your strength. Thank you very much.
It was awesome. Well, I don't have Beyonce to bring out with me, but I have an equally established panelist who's going to join us in the conversation now. So I want to bring out Chris Punonbayan. Chris is the Executive Director of the Asian Americans Advancing Justice, ALC, which founded in 1972 was the first legal civil rights organization for Asian Americans. And so let's kick it off, Chris, with just having you explain a little bit about your work and what you do.
Sure. Thank you for having me today. I'm going to do a little bit of a stripped-down acoustic-style presentation, following up from Aisha. Today, what I want to talk about is race. Race is top of mind for so many Americans. Over the last 18 months, we've seen the Black Lives Matter movement take the country by storm, calling for justice and police accountability. This presidential election is probably the most racially charged election that I've ever seen in my life, and maybe ever will. And just last Sunday, we saw the horrific events unfold in Orlando. We will never forget what happened because of the horrific violence, but I hope we also never forget who were the victims. 90% of those who were taken from us were LGBT Latinos. Americans of all backgrounds in recent days, weeks, and months have stepped up and made their voices heard, calling for more fairness, calling for more justice, and calling for more love. But there is a group who hasn't been heard quite as loudly as some of these others, and that is the voice of Asian Americans. I want to zoom out just a little bit and give you a couple quick hits about the Asian American community. Asian Americans now number 20 million in total population in the United States. Asian Americans are the fastest growing racial group in the country, surpassing Latinos, according to the Pew Center. Asian Americans will command $1 trillion in economic buying power by 2018, according to Nielsen. Asian Americans are increasing in political prominence now, walking the halls of Congress, in state legislatures, and in city halls. But there's one incredible fact that you may not know about Asian Americans. Asian Americans are the most digitally connected racial group of any group in the country. In case you didn't know, Asian Americans love technology. Asian Americans have the highest smartphone usage, the highest tablet usage, the highest rates of broadband access at home. This is across all age groups. Asian Americans spend more time online than any other group, averaging 2.5 hours per day online surfing the web. But now let me zoom back into the current moment and why that all matters. There are deep and widening racial divides in our country that are cracking the foundation of our multiracial democracy. It is now time for all of us to come together to begin the process of repairing that foundation, to begin the process of racial healing, and for all of us to do our part to eliminate racism in all its forms. My question is whether or not technology can help accelerate the pace of our becoming a more racially just society. And can Asian Americans play a central role in that equation? I think the answer is yes. Take, for example, online organizing. This is a space where many organizations are stepping up and claiming, building online communities to be able to collectivize action, to express their voice, express their activism, express their opinions. My organization is starting to enter this space by creating online platforms for petitions where Asian Americans and other progressives can make their voices heard. Asian Americans are a sleeping giant. It is an utter falsehood that Asian Americans are apathetic, don't want to make waves, don't care about these issues. What is true is that Asian Americans are fiercely strident in their beliefs, and they believe that we can and that we should eliminate racism in all its forms. By 2040, just 25 years from now, the United States will become a majority people of color country, surpassing whites for the first time in US history. This is a moment of tremendous opportunity, but demographics do not equal destiny. Right. Only when progressives of all races and all backgrounds come together to not only form the majority, but act like a majority, will we be able to move the change agenda forward that we need to see, a change agenda that must put front and center racial justice as one of its main planks, and technology can help us get there. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. So, both Aisha and Chris, you both work in driving change in your respective fields, right? And you do it for two different types of organizations. One that's more of a startup, one that's an older 44-year-old legacy type of organization. But one thing that strikes me as you both talk about kind of a moment of truth or an urgency, and that's not unlike some of our sponsors, the Case Foundation. One of their tenets of their Be Fearless campaign, which talks about let urgency conquer fear. Why do you think we are in a moment of urgency as it relates to the work you're doing right now? And walk us through how you personally kind of realized the urgency of the need to do work in your respective fields right now.
Yeah. Well, I've been doing this for a long time. And I spent a lot of time the last decade working inside companies, getting them to really be thinking about the human beings and the environmental impact that fashion was having. I then went on to work for the International Labor Organization, which is part of the UN system. And one of my jobs there was to say, gee, if we brought brands, local governments, and unions to the table, and if we really tried to negotiate, could we get to better conditions? But then something happened on April 24, 2012. I like to say it was the most important day in fashion's history in our lifestyle. And what happened was, to your point of urgency, Rana Plaza fell down. And we lost over 1,100 young men and women making our clothes. And it was the same conversations inside closed doors. And a part of me was just wondering, where is the consumer, the person sending the demand to the system? And every company I've ever worked with, big retailer, small niche brand, has always said, consumers don't care. Whatever we have to do on the inside. And I think the big aha for me was, it's not that consumers don't care, it's that we've been telling the story all wrong. It's always this fleeting headline, in a newspaper. It's like now there's a headline about Syrian children working in Turkish factories making our clothes, and it's always something horrible that's happening somewhere far away. There's no call to action, and then we get on with our lives. And so I did something incredibly stupid, which is leave my cushy UN job to start this startup, which is just 1 year old, but I really believe in all of you and the power that we can make as a collective.
I think for me, what has really kind of awakened me was the power of social media and the way that it has been able to amplify the organizing of the people of the United States. I look at the Occupy movement, I look at Black Lives Matter, and how they've been, even though they are on the streets, the digital story of how they have been able to do their work and what impact they're looking to achieve lit a fire in me and said, I am running a 44-year-old organization, and we were founded right on the heels of the civil rights movement, where law and policy, getting stronger laws on the books and enforcing them were the main way of bringing about social change. But today, if an organization were born today, it would be a no-brainer that we would be active in the digital space and building a footprint there. So I wanted to try and upgrade our systems and our way of communicating so that we would be more in line with these movements of the people on the streets.
Of course. Now, what are some of the lessons you've learned about millennials and young people as it relates to how to relate to them either via social media or in these spaces? What are some of the either things you've had to unlearn as you begin working with kind of a younger, more digitally native demographic, or some type of unlocks, the special tricks to convincing someone like me to join your campaign?
I think there was a lot to unlearn. I'm from San Francisco, which is not just a bedrock of innovation, but where a lot of social justice movements found their start. And for those of us on the inside, the only sort of secret sauce, a way to engage all of you, was to shock and awe you. There was this pain-centered narrative of, it's urgent, it's terrible, do something. And I think there was a lot to unlearn with this generation, and particularly to your point on being more digitally connected. The first is just that this pain-centered narrative does not work. We run a series that has slowly but surely started to get quite popular. We call it our Humans of Fashion. And it's everyday people on the street. It's starting to get to celebrities and slow fashion brands and the women who make our clothes and just their stories, authentic stories in the first person. So I think that's the first, is not just speaking from your brain, but also from your heart. To being authentic, to really letting the people tell the story for themselves. And I think the other is to start to have a two-way conversation, to really make the call to action clear. What is it that I want from you? There's so much information coming at you constantly, and it's more about very quickly, can I get to the point of, this is why you should care, and now can you do this?
I think an important lesson that I've learned in doing this work for a few decades now is that America is changing, and the next generation of activists is this generation, and information is taken in a different way. When I was coming through kind of the movement, and I just kind of accepted things that my elders had told me. This is the way we think about these things. And this approach was so not the way that this generation currently works. People want to understand the human face. People want to understand, straight up, what the connection is to their own daily lives. And so I learned a really hard lesson when we did a petition about increasing racial consciousness and opportunity in admissions, particularly to higher education on the affirmative action debate. And this petition totally tanked because we just said, support affirmative action, you know why. And no one did, because it's been, at least in California, a few generations since we had affirmative action on the books. So it was a deep learning for me to be able to make sure to center human stories and the human impact.
Of course. So we're getting to the end of our time, and there's been a ton of great questions that have been brought in. So I want to encourage everyone to definitely tweet at and reach out to both Chris and Aisha, because there's way more questions here than we're going to get to, and I want to make sure that these guys are very responsive. You can also tweet at me if you just want to say hi. I don't have anything smart to say in response, but I'm totally cool with you guys saying hi if that's what you'd like to do. But in closing, I want you guys to share, and one thing you've talked a lot about, goes to your direct point here, is this call to action. That's something about millennials and young people, especially digital natives, want a call to action, that we're responsive to that. And so what call to action would you share to the folks in the audience, to the folks following in the live stream, to the folks who are going to tweet at us later? What is the call to action today?
Oh, sure. So if you want to do this right now, please feel free to open up a tab on your browser, open up a new window, type in Chinese scientist petition Credo. We're partnering with Credo to be able to put up a petition right now. It's an active one that we have, where we are calling attention to the pattern of what appears to be racially motivated prosecutions by the Department of Justice against Chinese Americans, allegedly for economic espionage. This plays into horrible stereotypes about Asian Americans not being trustworthy and are just lying in wait to do bad things. And so we're calling attention to at least 4 cases that have happened where the US government dropped the charges against these individuals because they found out that they were totally baseless, but not after they had completely turned the lives of these Americans of Chinese descent upside down. And so we want to call for an investigation of this pattern of what turns out to be baseless prosecutions against Asian Americans. So please sign our petition.
Great. Well, I hope the one thing that you walk away from having us had this conversation is that you're all remakers now. Congratulations. I hope you follow us on Instagram if you really are interested in discovering slow fashion brands that are making a difference. The hashtag is Remake Our World. You're hopefully going to write to my girl Beyonce, right? So that's another call to action. But I think it really is about having that consciousness in our everyday lives and not to be overwhelmed with the massive issues that we're trying to deal with. I see the through lines in all of our work, and so it simply is the next time you buy something, ask about her, maybe tweet at us and say, hey, look at this great thing that I bought that respects her on the other end. And by God, how powerful is this experience now? Because she and I are connected, and I've given her a life of dignity, and I'm going to look good doing that. Yeah.
Of course. Now, where should everyone follow you? I know you plugged Instagram. Where should they follow you both?
I'm at C Punongbayan on Twitter.
Yeah. Our handle is Remake Our World, but if you'd like to write to me personally, it's A. Barenblatt. I'll also be here till tomorrow, so if you guys are here later this evening at the party, I'd love to answer some of those questions that we can get to.
Awesome. Well, how about another round of applause for Aisha?